Hello and welcome back to another episode of Aiding Your Game, where we continue to give content to help create your games to be more immersive and engaging for you and your players. Today we're going to be talking about session pacing and timing. So stick tight, let's dive in. So today we're going to be talking about session pacing with your sessions, how to keep them fun, interesting, moving along, lacking any of that dead air space, and engaging for your players so that they get the most out of it, and you as well. We'll be using some of the examples that we've already talked about as we discuss the session pacing. And one of the most important things to think about as you are planning your session is the time allotment that you have. Some people will have maybe an hour and a half for their gaming session. Some may end up with 6 to 8 hours. It's a really important factor to know ahead of time how much time your sessions will have. That way you can plan accordingly. If we use a good example of, say, 3 to 4 hours that we're going to have for our session, and we know that our adventure is going to be the ogre attacking a village as the primary storyline, we begin to start thinking about how are we going to use the story to fill that gap of 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours. The easiest thing to do is to actually log out the kind of components or parts of your story. They're going to do investigation or learning in the village. They're going to do a trek to the ogre's cave. They're going to engage with the ogre and then, of course, return back to the village. And as we mentioned, some of these may change. Some of them may alter based on the character's actions, as well as what the non-player characters and the monsters are doing. So it's got to be a little fluid. However, you can begin to get a basic idea of breaking things down into how to fill in those gaps. So let's say we've got a 4-hour session. 4 hours is a long time for an encounter with an ogre, especially when you're thinking of the combat aspect of it, when you're breaking things down into 6 seconds. So what do you do with the extra time? A lot of people don't pre-plan or think about this and end up having to come off with items right off the cuff, which can be fun and can definitely lead to future opportunities that are very engaging and the players love. But it can also put the DM in a pinch, because if they're not thinking about what to do to fill those gaps, they could start storylines that they're not able to get back to. They could over-reward players. They could really come up with some things that don't mesh well together. And while you're never doing it wrong if you're playing and having a good time doing it, it's easier not to put the extra stress on yourself of having to do that improv. Of course, some people thrive on that, and I would never say not to do it. But if you think about that 3 to 4 hour session, you're going to have an encounter with an ogre. What do you do with 3 to 4 hours? Again, depending on your players, what they're interested in, there are many things you can do. You can open up the table for lots of background details to come out. One of the things I like to do is, as everybody meets in one area, whether it be around the town notice board, in a tavern, wherever your PCs are meeting, pick one NPC who's very fleshed out and begins to talk to the NPCs. This is the guy in the supermarket who tells you his whole life story. This is the guy in the line at the bank who tells you all about what's going on in his life and his next vacation. These people exist in reality, so why not have them actually exist in your game world. It can be somebody who is just trying to size up the party and allows that party to delve into their backgrounds a little bit, kind of throw out some of the gems of what they're looking for, what their characters are looking for in the gaming universe. And a good thing to do, of course, is take notes, because unless they handed you that 32-page backstory, you can glean some nuggets, making them have to do some of the improv. Now, some players may not be interested in this at all, and that's okay. You can help guide them along and have that nosy neighbor, the talkative town person, just kind of start filling in the blanks. And it can be a fun way for some role playing between the players as well as the characters and an NPC. One thing I would caution you against, don't use too many NPCs, because there again, if you don't have them ready to go, you'll have to come up with them off the cuff, and it can be a little more challenging for cohesiveness of your NPCs, because your players may really love one of the NPCs you make off the cuff, and you're just making it off the cuff, don't jot notes down. Having to come back to it can be a challenge. So use some caution and a little bit of pre-thought. Trust me, it'll pay off. Another fun thing that you can do that really pulls in the players and their characters is utilize some of their skills and backgrounds as they're investigating around the town. Who in the past has any guild, let's say, experience? They could kind of size up the town and see, is it a robust town that could have good opportunity for them to use some of their guild skills? Are they survivalists who can look for tracks? Find ways to use some of the characters' strengths to enhance the story and enhance their opportunities to have a bigger impact on the game. Anybody who's built a character wants their character to succeed. Utilizing what they've built to enhance that story and make them feel kind of the moment of being the star is great. Just be sure to pass it around. Don't let one person dominate the game, and make sure everybody has an opportunity to contribute something. There again, it's a good way to utilize some of the time as they're facing that one-shot story just with an ogre, and you've got 4 hours to fill. Be very descriptive. Talk about the weather. Talk about sense of smell. The local baker has been going on fresh bread. Utilize things just to fill space, but don't have it fill space just for that. This is something where you want it all to tie back into the story and the community. They should really, for this story example that we're using, want to help the town, because ultimately they could decide not to help the town and to move on to the next bigger city where they can buy magic items. Who knows where it's going to lead with them. But the more descriptive you are, and the more you make the town that they're in feel alive and feel homey to them, the more they will want to do the right thing in saving the town and tackling that ogre. Additionally, as they're traveling to the ogre, once they find out what's going on and decide to take action, if they decide to take action, then you can use that to your advantage as well for some space. Talk about the landscape. Talk about some of the things that they're seeing on the road. Maybe there are no animals or just a scattering of birds. Don't overdo it, but use it just like a little bit of salt and pepper to your world. Again, just to help extend that time of playability, give them an opportunity to interact with each other as well as the environment, and ultimately bring that story world to life. Don't overdo it, just a little salt and pepper. Combat, once they meet the ogre, let's say it's in the lair, and they are getting ready for combat. Of course, the rules talk plenty about how to determine how that combat should go with initiatives, turns, turn management. I've found more often than not, players are very crafty. Many times I've already discussed tactics, and your combat gets shortened incredibly. That's okay, because it isn't always all about combat. One thing to do is make sure that they enjoy what they're doing with their play style. If they are quick to jump into combat and dominate that combat turn, that's all right as well. At that point, what you have to do is be a little more descriptive with kind of the environment. As they're talking about their characters, also talk about the villain the same way. If they're more descriptive on what they're doing, how they're moving, be just as descriptive in how you're describing what that ogre is moving and what he's doing. Don't hesitate to use a lot of adjectives. He was stinking, his pelt clothing is stiff and creaking, the noxious breath, the horrible body odor. Really, again, make it alive in their world. This is, again, some of the flavor that makes them be able to visualize and use their imagination to feel what their characters are feeling, and leads to a lot of engagement from the players. Also, as they are working on discovering the treasure of the ogre in its lair, again, don't just give them all of the details. You've got this amount of gold, this amount of silver, this amount of copper. Make them have to search and find it if you have to fill in the gaps. And make it a little bit of that hunt. That's where they find that back exit that could lead to another adventure. That's their next plot hook. But really make them utilize the time of the session. They're tearing open a bag and some copper pieces spill out. They've opened a jar and there is some type of a trade good in there. Maybe it's wax, maybe it's a fancy incense. Whatever that piece is, make it fit the session time that you have. If you have more time, utilize more time to make it more actionable and more descriptive. Same thing as they're headed back to the village, and take the time, perhaps now there are a few more birds, show that their actions have had some type of an impact on the environment around them, even though it's in the real world too quick for that kind of thing to happen. Remember, this is a fantasy game. Have fun with it. Show what their good deeds have accomplished. Just, again, use it as salt and pepper. Don't overdo it. Finally, when they get back to the village, again, it should have some type of pacing set to the session. Perhaps you've still got time. There could be a celebration in the evening, and they put up banners and have fantastic cakes from the baker. The children could be now out playing and dressed as the heroes. Use those flavorful pieces, again, to show they've had an impact on the environment. And because you have that time to spare, you can be a little more descriptive and playful. Perhaps one of the NPCs at this point comes up and talks about his pride in his village and how impressed he is with the adventurers, and he wants the adventurers to go and find his grandfather's lost magical sword. Utilize these times to create plot hooks. Just a word of caution, make sure you take notes, because as you're throwing out those breadcrumbs, the players may gobble them up, and if you're not prepared, they could take your hand with them. Ultimately, the opposite could be true. Perhaps you only have an hour and a half for your session, and this same scenario is going to be played. At this time, you're going to have to cut down that content. You're not going to be able to have the time to fill in as much. As the characters are meeting around the town board or in the tavern or wherever they're going to be meeting, perhaps this is where you want to just have a paper saying, notice, please help. Give the brief details so that they can start their adventure faster. Time management is definitely a piece. I don't want you to think of railroading as always a good thing or always a bad thing, but there are times where it's a necessary thing. With a short time frame for your session, you need to get your players to confront the ogre and save the village. In just an hour and a half, if you find them doing more lollygagging, trying to talk to more NPCs, trying to do this, trying to do that, don't hesitate to speed up the game by having the NPCs be more abrupt. Their village is being attacked by an ogre. They don't want to stand around talking. Maybe the ogre comes to the village and they have to confront him there. Set the pacing to match your game session. If you've got a shorter window of time and you know your objective is for them to confront the ogre and save the village, that has to be a key part of that. And it doesn't have to happen right in the opening, but it should get to that. If you find that players are taking a long time and not grabbing onto that plot hook to go and get the ogre, force their hand, have that ogre meet them right in the village. Again, that story pacing is going to be based on your session time. The more time you have for a session, the more time you have for that story to unfold. The less time you have, you need to get to that story climax faster. You'll be able to have your players actually help flesh out the game world, NPCs, their characters, and give you ideas of where they want the story to progress in the future. D&D and any RPG is really a storytelling platform where everybody should get to tell some type of a story. Make sure it's not all one-sided. Use your plot hooks, use your planning sessions to pull them in, because after all, the more engaged your players will be, the more they'll want to come to your table, because the more they feel they're helping tell a story. And with that, I hope this game pacing session was beneficial to you. We've got a few more videos coming out for this season, and make sure down below, like, follow, share. We want to help grow this community and to bring content that's beneficial to both new players, experienced players who are beginning to get burnt out, and experienced players who are just looking for a different angle. Also, we will be featuring a product at the end of this video. Links for that will be below, as will the links for our website. Until next time, happy playing, happy planning, and happy adventuring. Always ask, where will your adventures take you?